thing that I want to mention about something you talked about. You mentioned stuff Fundies like. This is it warmed my heart to hear you mention this website. And I don't know when I ran across this website. I feel like it was 2008, 2010, somewhere around there. And it was amazing. It was, I think about, in fact, Kayla, I was, when we were thinking of just fun stuff to put in the show, I went back to stuff Fundies like and started scrolling through it, because when I read this website, for those of you, it's still up. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, go check it out. It is amazing. They'll have sections in there about watch night services that we loved. As for those you don't know, that's for December 31st. You get together with your church and you sit around listening to sermons until the new year comes in, and you play games like Dutch Blitz, which is also on there. They talk about the exaggerated urban legends. You know how there's a fire changes color depending on how hot it is, and you have orange fire you're used to, blue fire is really hot. Well, the reason hell is black is because the hottest fire is black. I heard that so many times growing up. Bullshit, not real at all.
I just found out that's not true.
I just thought
that was the case.
Yeah, they had the website is so amazing. It's not updated anymore. The guy hasn't updated in a long time, but it is a fantastic website. Another one that is still around, unfortunately, but kind of started out the same way as Stuff Fundies like was the Babylon Bee. The Babylon Bee back in the day. Yeah, it used to be a really funny website that was just Christians poking fun at themselves and saying, oh, this kind of thing always happens in church. Isn't this interesting? And over the years, it's just turned to...
Got really dark.
Yeah, it's just fascism now. That's the entire website.
The new owner is a mess. Yeah, Stuff Fundies like I'm sad is not there. And, Daryl Dow, who started the site, has been on my list forever as somebody I would love to talk to and interview and just talk to, like, what was it like running that? You were the only person for so long that had a platform that massive. Like, the amount of viewership I'm sure that site got for a while was pretty intense. And, and then, the Babylon Bee was, for a minute was really great. And then
it was funny.
Sold. And I think Joel, no, not Joel Webbin. I forget who the guy is that ended up. But that's a different guy. But whoever ended up buying it
to talk about Joel.
Really, it's sad to see where it's ended up. But
it is. I saw the Babylon Bee. It was last year, the year before. Like the president, the guy who owns it or whatever, he put this long tweet thread talking about how the black church is spiritually bankrupt. And of course, the black church is spiritually bankrupt. That's why they vote for Democrats, because he said that they were economically and socially segregated. So of course they were theologically segregated as well. I mean, this is just like, it's just racism and fascism. And hey, aren't Republicans great? That's the entire thing. It's not even pretending. All the articles aren't even comedy. It's like AOC is so stupid she can't tie her shoes. That's it. That's all the Babylon Bee is right now. But yeah, sorry, Kaz, I want to jump in if you want to go ahead with your questions on what he was saying. I had to throw in that comedy part with Stuff Fundies like.
Well, you kind of already answered it, but I just wanted to ask you more about when you started the podcast and like what that process for me, like even just doing this with a group of 3 other people, it was super scary. And we are several years later, and at least from my like kind of narrow perspective, whenever I found you, I felt like you were kind of it. I wasn't finding a whole lot of other people, voicing concerns and like making it make sense, drawing it all the way back to where these like ideas start in sermons and in the churches and stuff like that. So I really just wanted to know, like, were you scared when you started all this, and especially now that I know that you were still a little bit kind of still in the belief system, what did that feel like?
I think I wasn't scared. I think I was just kind of angry. And I think it kind of came from a place of, I can tell you initially, like, when I decided to say anything publicly was when Sarah Jackson's story happened, and people can Google that name and see what happened. But it was basically identical situation to the story that I'd come across as a 16, 17-year-old, where a pastor was abusing a teenage girl in the church, and the church was rallying around the abuser. And at the time of that story happening, I was already an adult living on my own with a wife and a infant at that time. And reading that story, I was like, somebody needs to talk about this. And I found myself in this position of, you mentioned like being it. Like I was sitting there going, okay, there's news coverage for the individual stories. There's once in a while a paper will give enough resources to like a Sarah Smith who did what I think is one of the best pieces of journalism on the IFB, which was the Spirit of Fear article that she did. But no newspaper has the resources to keep letting a reporter do those stories. There's not enough people in the general public interested in those stories. At least that's what I thought at the time. And then I was like, so if somebody's going to do it and I'm waiting for them to do it and nobody can or doesn't want to, I might as well. And so starting the show, it was really just a place of frustration that like this wasn't being talked about regularly, because I would see those stories and it still bothers me because I call newspapers now and try to get them to look deeper. But it's like you'll see the really basic article, it's a paragraph long that says youth pastor arrested. And it's like, do a little digging and go, what college are they from? How many people from this type of college have been arrested in the last year? Like I just was getting frustrated that it couldn't be dealt with. And I felt like it needed to be
It was
someone
still
from
so
the inside.
isolated.
Yeah, to dive into it. What's cool about that though is like something was happening during that time, and whether it's providence or like just enough people fed up at the right time, but like you guys were thinking about starting a show pretty close to that time. The Leaving Eden podcast started right around that time. At the time, the Recovering Fundamentalist, I think, was going in a decent direction, when they were launching.
Yeah.
That's for deep in that rabbit hole. But like, there was a lot of shows that I think did a lot of really good work in opening a conversation. And now it's not just, it was just me for like, I feel like a couple days. And then it was like, boom,
Yeah.
now there's a bunch of others and people that didn't talk to each other. It was just, we all felt
Yeah.
this thing. And I still don't know what it was that pushed everyone over the edge. I think it was just the pressure it built to a point like everyone wanted to do something.
Yeah, there was like that it was like almost in the air all of a sudden. I remember
Yeah.
like people calling me and reaching out to me that I hadn't spoken to in a lot, like randomly, to
Yeah.
just talk about some stuff like that. So as far as the movement goes, the blind eye movement, or this, like, I think what we hope would be like a more general knowledge that it exists and it's very prevalent and kind of hides in plain sight. Do you feel like the movement is where you would like it to be now, or do you still feel like there's another wave of public knowledge to come with this particular thing?
The movement of like advocates, or the movement
As
like,
far as just, I feel like I still have to explain IFB very
yeah,
regularly, just like in my daily life when I'm talking to people about, having a podcast,
yeah,
and like what it's about. I still have to like do a lot of clarifying down. So I mean,
yeah,
personally for me, I would like to see it be just something that, and this might be a pipe dream because it's one of a lot of cults. There's a lot
yeah,
in
right.
America, but where there's just like more knowledge of it, and as something to be aware of,
Yeah.
where do you
Yeah,
think we're at with that?
I was just talking with everybody from Blind Eye actually last night. I had like all 5 people from their group talking about Let Us Pray and like awareness, and I was talking about like optimism or pessimism about where things are at. I think the IFB is in a weird place where like it is dying very quickly. Like the big meetings are not so big. Like the Sword of Lord conference is smaller than ever. Like big things like that, and they were never big to begin with. Like it's a small movement getting smaller. So like I'm happy that it is kind of dying the way it is.
Yep.
Obviously would love it to accelerate, and I'm trying to do my part, like to make that
Right.
happen. But in terms of like the public, I feel like my concern is not so much necessarily getting like the person down the road to understand like here's what the IFB is, because they're never going to go into an IFB church anyway. That's certainly part of what I do, but I think what I'm excited about is the fact that there's so much coming out about cults in general, and I feel like the public understanding of what a cult is beyond just like eyes wide shut robes and candles, it's like No, it's people understand like high control groups. People are understanding like red flags and narcissism and manipulation on a larger level. And I feel like that's the conversation that I want to see progress. And it'll do the work of affecting Scientology, the IFB, Mormonism, like all of those things are dwindling in major ways. But there's also, that umbrella needs to get bigger for a lot of people because they don't see it
Yeah.
in their political affiliations or in their certain club, that they feel is better. So I think I'm optimistic as of this conversation, but like depending on the day, sometimes I'm super pessimistic and cynical. Like yesterday, I was pretty cynical in my answer. So just depends on the day.
Yeah, this thing with the IFB cult and cults in general, it is difficult because people's idea of a cult, like what you see in a film,
Yeah.
isn't exactly, or even generally, what it's going to be like in real life.
Yeah.
A lot of times the cult's right in front of your face and you don't notice it. I
Mhm.
mean, we were in it, and at the time, I didn't think I was in a cult. I never considered it that way. And it wasn't even a fun cult. When you're mentioning Eyes Wide Shut, those folks at least were having a good time, But we
Depends
were
which
just,
character you are in that movie.
depends which character. True, true. For the most
Tom
part,
Cruise did not have fun.
so that's an interesting thing, that the inverse relationship between the fun and the cults, because if I go out and start a cult, it's usually me having a great time. Everybody else
Yeah.
is suffering. But in those movie cults, everyone seems to be enjoying themselves except one poor dude, like
Yeah, right.
like the Wicker Man or something like that. But this is just something that's what you mentioned, that you don't think people need to understand the IFB particularly, but just want them to understand cults in general.
Mhm.
And I don't know, the way I see it is I do try to make sure people understand the independent fundamental Baptist movement, or just the Christian nationalist movement in general, because
Yeah.
the damage it's done politically and socially to the nation. Did you by chance go to a Christian school? I know you spent every day in a church. Did your church have a Christian school when you grew up?
Yeah. My dad was the principal for most of the time I was there, and both my parents were teachers. So yeah, I was in the Christian school, and I want to mention just before it slides by, like the Christian nationalist side of it is something that I'm also glad there's a big conversation about right now. And it's something I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone the other day, and I said, it's interesting when you do a show, like you want to be able to not cut off conversation. You want people to listen and be challenged. And so you don't want to always go guns blazing and make them go like, that's definitely not me. And, they flip it off and they don't hear what you're actually saying. And I told him, I said, I've tried to stay out of like politics, for so long. And, I said, but the Christian nationalism side is like so unavoidable. And she said something that totally, I was like, yep. She said, I've been around the Independent Fundamental Baptists. I've been around the SBC. I've been around like some of the Methodist world. She's like, the thread through all of them is Christian nationalism. And so I think like the more people can understand that relationship and like the goal of like, I would say like the sinister kind of underbelly of the evangelical world, like that's going to help them understand the IFB, the SBC. Like that's why you see a Paul Chappell from West Coast Baptist College all of a sudden hanging out with the John MacArthur during COVID. It's like, oh, we have this political agenda. Now our theological differences don't matter.
Yeah, you stumbled onto a consistent theme on this show. Two of them, actually. One of them is how you mentioned that you try to keep